I guess you could call this a Christmas edition of the podcast, but it's that time of year again when everybody's best of lists are coming out. Movies, cars, computers, you name it. And so I haven't done this before, but I thought I would put together a best of mobile filmmaking gear for 2019. This could also be a quasi gift giving guide, I guess, too. But I'm also going to give commentary on each one of these picks, and I've picked 10. It was hard to narrow it down. And so I also have an honorable mention list at the end. So here we go. Let's find out what the best gear of 2019 was. Hey guys, this is Blake Calhoun and another episode of Almost Professional, the podcast about mobile filmmaking, DIY filmmaking, indie filmmaking, really all things filmmaking. And today we're talking gear. Now, sometimes I'm a walking contradiction, I'll be the first to admit, because my whole mantra, the whole idea behind mobile filmmaking and indie filmmaking for me is that the gear doesn't really matter. And I really stand by that. It's true. But of course, on the flip side, you do need gear to make a movie, to make a YouTube video, to make whatever you're making. I guess I just don't want people to obsess about the gear. The gear is just a means to an end. It's the story that matters. It's the story you're trying to tell with the gear that is the important thing. This list could also be called my favorite things, because best is definitely a subjective word. So just keep that in mind. And you probably will disagree with some of my choices. I may have forgotten some of the things that you would have added. And my first pick here is probably one that would be a surprise to you if you follow this podcast or my YouTube channel. And that is the Ulanzi DOF adapter. I did an episode about DOF adapters and how really they kind of go against my philosophy of mobile filmmaking, because I like to keep things simple. I like to be able to run and gun. And so attaching a photo lens to your camera, to your smartphone rig, is not necessarily easy, and it doesn't really fall into the run and gun simple category. However, like with anything, there's a time and a place, and it really just depends on the project you're producing, on the video or the film you're making. And so to have the ability to create a more cinematic, in quotes, look, it's really kind of cool, especially if you're making a movie or you're wanting to add some very shallow depth of field, regardless of what kind of project you're doing. And the other thing with this Ulanzi depth of field adapter, it is affordable. It's like $140. And so that alone makes it very indie friendly. Now, yes, you'd have to buy a cage and you'd have to get lenses. So there are things you would need to add to it for sure, but you can definitely create some interesting looks. And as a matter of fact, there was a short film entered in the Filmic Pro contest this year called No Hard Feelings. I think it was made out of Australia. And when I first watched it, I was like, what? That doesn't look like a phone movie at all. I haven't found any behind the scenes on it. It's really obvious they used a depth of field adapter and it looks really good. If you haven't seen that movie, definitely check it out. It's on the Filmic Pro website and there's a link to it in a blog post that I did. I should probably say that now. I have a blog post I did about this top 10 list as well, and I'll link that in the show notes of this episode. I'm also going to release a YouTube video around this same topic, so look for that soon as well. So yeah, the Ulanzi depth of field adapter is my number 10 pick. And by the way, I will be doing a video around this device and around the B-Script depth of field adapter. After that last episode, both these companies reached out to me, which was cool, and they offered to let me test out these adapters. And so I'll be doing that very soon, probably in early 2020. So look for those videos on my YouTube channel. And I'll probably talk about it here on this podcast as well. All right, my number 9 pick, and this is the number 1 accessory I always recommend. It's not number 1 on this list, but it's very important for filmmakers that want to shoot smartphone video that doesn't look like smartphone video. And that is ND filters. And this year, it's the Sandmark Hybrid ND filters. They have polarizer and ND combined, which is really nice. And importantly, they work on the iPhone 11 Pro. They're the only filters I found thus far that do work with that new lens system. I have a feeling Polar Pro and a couple other manufacturers are working on something. But right now in 2019, these are the ones I like the most. And they just clip onto your device, which is cool. You don't need any additional mount. Admittedly, ND filters are not glamorous. I say that all the time. but they're really important to create more professional, polished, and, dare I say, cinematic video. So the Sandmark Hybrid ND filters are my number 9 pick. Okay, number 8, the Zhiyun Smooth Q2. There are so many darn gimbals on the market, I'll be the first to admit that. There's a new one every month, it seems like. And so gimbals have almost become a commodity, they really have. And I will say that almost every gimbal I test, and I test a lot of them, they're all good. They're all very good in their own way. And so you really can't go wrong with gimbals these days. You really can't. And one trend I've been seeing recently are these what I call hybrid gimbals. And that's where this gimbal falls into. And that is gimbals that work with a variety of different cameras and or that have a more professional build, professional controls. I love the Smooth Q, the original one. And so when I heard about this gimbal, I was really excited about it. This gimbal's totally different than the Smooth Q though, it really is, but in a good way. This one is much more professional. The original one worked great with smartphones and it was very simple. That's one thing I loved. This one is a much more professional grade device. And if you want one that will also hold compact cameras and small mirrorless cameras, then you can also look at the sibling to this one, the Zhiyun Crane M2. Both are excellent hybrid style gimbals depending on what you need. So my number 8 pick is the Smooth Q2 gimbal from Zhiyun. All right, number 7, and this one kind of came out of left field, and that is the bayonet mount version of the Moondog Labs anamorphic lens. The Moondog anamorphic is my favorite anamorphic lens that they make for smartphones, for sure. It was the original, and I just think it looks the best, I really do. It's subtle differences, but here's the deal. I really rarely use my Moondog lenses because they're a little bit cumbersome to use. Especially the 37mm mount, because you need to put that on a B-script or a helium core rig. And so for any kind of quick run and gun stuff, it just doesn't work for me. For more involved setups, if you're shooting a music video or a short film or something, sure, it's not a problem at all to set your camera up like that. And so late last year, I got the 12.5mm mount, which was kind of a direct competition with Moment. It mounted onto a Rhino Shield case. However, you still had to have a different case. And let's just be honest, changing cases to put a different lens on really is not fun. It actually sucks. And so even with that 12.5mm lens, I never used it. I just really didn't use it. But now with this bayonet mount lens, you can put this lens on a Moment case, a Rhino Shield case, and even a Siru case, I believe. And so I'm calling this one more of a universal mount in quotes. And the nice thing is, if you have that 12.5mm mount version, you can send it in and they will convert it to this new bayonet mount. And so that's what I'm going to do. And to my knowledge, the lens has not been released yet, but it is coming soon. And so look for that in the new year, and also look for some videos from me about this. So number 7, Moondog Labs bayonet mount, more of a universal mount anamorphic lens. We'll be seeing even more lens flares now from everybody. All right, number 6, and this one might be a surprise for some people too, but that is the Moment 14mm fisheye, the brand new lens that just came out last month. You might be questioning this pick because the iPhone 11 has that ultra-wide lens that everybody's been talking about and using, including myself. But here's the deal, that lens is great. I use it a lot more than I ever thought I would, but it suffers pretty bad in low light. Especially on video, but even photos. And so I found myself not using it in any kind of low light situation. It's just really noisy and the images can be kind of soft. Depends on what you're doing. In some situations, it's totally fine. But if you're trying to do anything that's a little more polished or professional, I find that attaching a wide lens like this to the iPhone wide lens, which is a f1.8 lens, and by the way, the ultra wide is f2.4, doesn't sound like that big of a difference, but it really is when you're in low light. So attaching a lens like this works great in lower light. And also Moment claims, and I'm not sure if this is just marketing BS or not, but they said this lens was designed for the larger sensor and that it's sharp edge to edge. And if you're using the Moment Pro camera app, you can easily take the distortion out of the lens too, which is pretty cool if you don't want that look in your photos or your video. So yes, third-party lenses are still important in my opinion. And so the new Moment 14mm is my number 6 pick on this list. All right, number 5, and this is a combo pick, both from the same company, and this has to do with audio. And that is the Rode Wireless Go and the Rode Lavalier Go. I have really found this is a great little mic system, and I use it quite a bit. Not only on my YouTube videos, but on client work as well. It's not the highest end mic for sure, but considering you can get a wireless system for like $200, and then the mic is $75, $80 more, you're in for under $300 for a system that is rock solid and from a name brand company, and it really sounds pretty good. I do find that I usually need to add EQ in post, which I do that anyway to almost all audio, including this podcast. Add compression, some denoising, that kind of thing. But the Rode mic sounds a little bit boxy at times, but overall it's really pretty good fidelity. And again, the bang for the buck and the ease of use. It's so easy to use, and it works with smartphones and traditional cameras. And so it's really a no-brainer to add this to your kit. All right, number 4, and this is something that I had been looking forward to since about NAB time, back in April. I went to NAB and I met up with the Filmic Pro guys and some of the LumaFusion folks. They had the mobile filmmaking pavilion there, which was really cool. I'm actually planning to go back this next year, and I believe they're going to do it again. I hope so. NAB is the National Association of Broadcasters. It's in Las Vegas, and basically it's just a big gear porn show. It's great. And of course you're in, Las Vegas, so use your imagination. That's a fun place to be. But anyway, while I was there, I heard a rumor about a shoulder pod, a new shoulder pod. If you watch my YouTube videos at all, you know that the ShoulderPod S1 is probably my favorite all-time accessory. Super simple. It's just a mount for your camera. It's a grip as well, but I really never used it as a grip. It just mounts your camera onto a tripod. But it's very compact and easy to use and works great. The build quality is excellent. And so cut to about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I get an email from the ShoulderPod guys that the new G2 has been released. And they want to know if I want to test out a review unit. And of course I said, absolutely. And so I made a video about it, and spoiler alert here, I think it's great. It's completely different than the original S1 or the S2, but it's also a lot better in many respects. It's different though, it's a different better. It's really geared more towards a professional application and really probably more specifically mobile journalism, although you don't have to use it in that regard at all. I actually think this could compete with a B-script too in the indie filmmaking world or whatever world you're using it. You don't have the ability to mount lenses like you do with a B-script, but it operates in a very similar fashion, and it's about half the cost. The B-script is around $139, $135, something like that. And the ShoulderPod G2 is about $69, $70. Now, I love the B-script. That's not going away from me. But this is definitely an interesting tool. But it is pretty big. Now, I don't say that in a negative. I've seen some people knock it for being a beast, for being too big. For me, that's not a knock. For me, that's a plus. Even back when I started using DSLR cameras 10 years ago, whenever it was, they were so small it was kind of hard to get smooth pans, especially on a tripod. And so that was one reason we used to trick those out with cages and big batteries. Having extra weight can be a good thing for professional video, especially panning, tilting, or even on gimbals sometimes. The super lightweight cameras just don't do as well, especially on the bigger gimbals. So yeah, the ShoulderPod G2 is pretty big, but I think that's great because now I have options. I will still use the S1 depending on what I'm doing. And now I have the G2 with the big hand grip and all the cold shoes, etc. for bigger jobs. So yeah, number 4 is the ShoulderPod G2. All right, number 3, and this is a product I actually haven't used myself, but I own the previous version, and this new version is just taking it to the next level. And that is the Aperture AL-MC LED light. I own the AL-M9, and I love it. It's probably my favorite small portable light. It's very small, credit card size, but it really puts out a lot of light, and originally it was only like $45. Complete no-brainer to have in your kit at all times. So this new one's about the same size, but it adds RGB controls and lighting effects. It is about twice the cost. I think it's about $90 to $100 range. Earlier this year, I reviewed a light from Bowling called the P1 that was very similar to this, and I almost put that on this list, but it's about $150. And so part of my philosophy is to get the best bang for the buck. And while I love that bowling light, and it is something I still recommend, if I was buying one today, I would probably get this Aperture light. The YouTuber Gerald Undone, if you watch him, he had a very similar reaction to these lights as well. I think he picked the bowling as his best light earlier in the year, and then he switched to this aperture. And then Caleb Pike over at DSLR Video Shooter, he did a review of this light and thinks it's great as well. This is just another one of those products that can add a lot of production value to your shoots for not a lot of money. All right, number 2 here. And did I mention there were a lot of gimbals on the market? Yeah, there are a lot of gimbals on the market. And the one I mentioned earlier, the Smooth Q2, was what I would call a hybrid gimbal. The number 2 spot on this list goes to a more traditional smartphone gimbal, and that is the DJI Osmo Mobile 3. And when I say traditional, I mean really geared towards smartphones only. I did an informal poll on Twitter asking people what their favorite mobile filmmaking gear of 2019 was, and this ranked very high, if not at the top, on pretty much everybody's list. I actually don't own this gimbal. I own every other gimbal under the sun pretty much. If you watch me on YouTube, you've seen I did that video recently where I compared each gimbal and whether it would work with the iPhone 11. I think I compared 10 gimbals, something like that. I have the Osmo Mobile 2. I also have the original Osmo, and I have the Osmo Pocket. So I like DJI. And this gimbal, while it doesn't hold as much weight as some of the other gimbals, it folds, it's very easy to use. And for the most part, it's pretty affordable. It's about $120, and I think right now, right here before Christmas 2019, it's on sale for $109, so it's like $10 off at the moment. But I would say, especially for beginners, if you're looking for a reliable, easy to use gimbal, then this Osmo Mobile 3 is a safe bet. And you can definitely get some really good results using it. This may be a little more of an obvious pick, but I do think it deserves to be near the top of this list. And so the Osmo Mobile 3 is my number 2 pick. All right, my number 1 pick. Can you guess? Do you have an idea? What do you think it is? It may be obvious to some, it may not be to others. But my number 1 pick for best mobile filmmaking gear of 2019, the iPhone 11 ultra wide lens. Now, I can see some of you guys rolling your eyes. Well, maybe not, because you guys are probably not Apple haters. There are a lot of people out there that hate Apple. And by the way, I am not an Apple fanboy, far from it. Yeah, my YouTube channel is called iPhoneographers. That's because back when I started it in 2012, I shot all my mobile video on iPhone. And really back then especially, it was the only game in town. Today there are a lot of good offerings for Android, etc. I get that. But I will say I believe Apple focuses on the video side of things much more than the other companies. And I do think the results speak for themselves, really, if you see all the different videos out there. But I digress. The main reason I'm picking this is because of the ultra-wide lens. I didn't realize I would use it as much as I have been, but I really use it a lot and I like it. But as a filmmaker, one of the main things I like, it does not have optical image stabilization, OIS, the dreaded OIS. Great for photography, horrible for video. It's the part on the tele or the wide. If you're handheld and move the camera around too much, you get a jello effect. Even if you barely bump the camera, everything just gets wobbly. It instantly just destroys any of your footage. So by not having that really is great. Now you can use the camera on dollies or sliders or what have you. And the other thing is, it has remarkably good image stabilization. Now part of that is because it's so wide. Wide lenses always appear more stable. But Apple has put in what they call cinematic image stabilization, which is electronic image stabilization, software image stabilization. And in the native camera app in particular, the stabilization is great. You can almost use it without a gimbal. I say almost. I've done several videos showing that, and I still use a gimbal, and I still recommend using a gimbal. But for some stuff, you can definitely get away not using a gimbal. And it works really well on third-party apps too, like Filmic Pro or Moment, etc. Not as well though. The native app is steadier. But then you don't have your manual control, you don't have the higher bit rates, you get those weird variable frame rates. The frame rates aren't consistent like they are in third-party apps. When you're shooting 24p, sometimes you'll get 25, sometimes you'll get 23. In Filmic Pro, you always get 24. So there are advantages and disadvantages, of course, regardless of the app you're using. And I assume since you're listening to this podcast, you follow mobile filmmaking and you have seen the Apple commercial, that's what it is, called Snowball. All the kids having the epic snowball fight out in the woods. All shot on the iPhone 11 Pro. It really looks darn good. And they didn't use ND filters, but they went for that staccato look, which actually does work well in action scenes or zombie movies or whatever. So you don't always have to use ND, but more times than not, ND is the way to go. But I really love the short film they made, the video. And what's funny is I heard a lot of people say, but they did all this post-production work. They added effects. They did color correction. That's not just an iPhone. And my response is, yeah. So what? That's what you would do on any job. If they shot that on an Arri Alexa, if they shot that on a Red camera, hell, if they shot that on a GoPro, you would do post-production work, you would do visual effects, you would do color grading. It's really a stupid argument, and it just plays into the Apple hater thing, I really believe. I'm actually looking on YouTube right now, and that video has 21 million views, over 21 million views, has 48,000 likes, but it has 9.9K, so 10,000 dislikes. 10,000 dislikes on that video. What? Are you kidding me? That video is great. If they didn't say what that was shot on, that would probably have 0 dislikes. Well, not 0, but people love to dislike stuff on YouTube, that's for sure. But 10K dislikes in that video, that just makes no sense. No sense whatsoever. There's just some people that dislike Apple no matter what they do and no matter how good it is. Completely objectively speaking, the iPhone 11 Pro is a fucking good phone. It's a really good phone. It's surprisingly good. It is so much better than my iPhone XS Max. And not only from a filmmaking perspective. The battery life is amazing. That A13 chip is really amazing. The phone really doesn't overheat anymore. I think you could roll on a video for hours if you wanted to without it dropping any frames. It's just a really good device. So I picked the iPhone 11 Pro and its ultra-wide lens as my #1 pick on this list. It's hard to separate the two, but I really did pick it more for the lens than I did the actual phone, although the phone, as I mentioned, is great. So those are my top 10 picks, and I said at the top I do have a few honorable mentions that could have easily been on the list. And so those are not in any particular order here. The Deity VMic D3 Pro, that's been a great mic, I use it all the time. The Filmmaking G6 Max gimbal, I just recently did a review of that. It's another hybrid gimbal and it is really good. The Rode VideoMic NTG, now this hasn't been released yet as of this recording. I have a Rode NTG 4 Plus, a shotgun microphone, and it is great, I love it. And so this new Rode VideoMic NTG looks really promising. Another one is the Siru anamorphic lens. It's in the affordable anamorphic lens category. Ulanzi makes one as well, but the Siru one in particular looks really good, and it's about half the cost of the Moment anamorphic or the Moondog. Two more here, and the first one is the Filmmaking Vlog Pocket Gimbal. Yeah, I know, there's a lot of gimbals, but this one stood out to me because of really how small it actually is. When they say pocket gimbal, they mean pocket gimbal, and it will hold a surprising amount of weight. So if you're traveling and want to have a small gimbal with you, and it will literally fit in your pocket, and especially in a backpack. And the last honorable mention, although I could probably add more, it's the Polar Pro Variable ND Peter McKinnon Edition. The cool thing about these ND filters are they will work with all your different cameras. You have to get a mount to use them on a smartphone, but these are great if you own smartphones and other cameras. Now they're an investment, it's about $250, but the quality is really unmatched, and when it comes to variable NDs, you'll often get some weirdness when you use cheaper ones, vignetting or weird colors. And so these Polar Pro, while more expensive, are really worth it. And plus you get to say you work with Peter McKinnon. At least that's what I say. So that's my best of 2019. What do you think? Which ones do you like? Which ones do you not like? What did I forget? I'm sure I missed something. There were a lot of great filmmaking products released this year for sure. But as I said earlier, keep in mind, this is just the paint. You're the painter. You want to focus more on your painting skills and worry less about the paint. You really do. I've mentioned this a couple times in previous podcasts, but I am working on some interviews and those will be coming soon. I've got several people lined up that I think you will enjoy hearing from. And speaking of focusing on your painting more than the paint, if you want to learn more about smartphone video and mobile filmmaking, definitely consider checking out one of my courses. Learn to master the Filmic Pro app, also how to turn your smartphone into a professional quality video camera, and coming soon I'm working on a color grading course, and a few other mobile filmmaking ones coming later in 2020. Thank you to everyone who has taken one of the courses, and also thank you guys for listening to this podcast this year. I really do enjoy doing this, and I hope you guys enjoy listening. My goal is to do one every 3 weeks right now, and maybe in the future do more. So we'll see how that goes in 2020. Wow, 2020, that really does sound like the future. That sounds like something in a movie to me. I'm still looking for flying cars. I haven't seen those yet. And I don't think that Cybertruck's going to be flying anywhere anytime soon. That thing is a tank. I'm Blake Calhoun, and this is Almost Professional. Have a great holiday season, guys. Happy New Year. Thanks for listening, and I will look forward to talking to you in the next episode.